Yes, good morning and welcome to the news review right here on Power Breakfast on Citizen TV. My name is Fred Indemuli, ready to look at the headlines. And with me this morning in studio, we do have Senator Kimani Wamatangi from Kiambu, Chris Wamalwa MP Kiminini, and Didmas Barasa MP Kimilili. Now note the difference. These two constituencies are in different counties. There's Kimilili constituency, which is in Bungoma County, and Kiminini, which is in Trans Nzoia County.
Rift Valley.
Yes, in Rift Valley, former Rift Valley. We have members, because people always confuse those two. Now, at least when you put the faces, you will know the difference. MP Kiminini, Chris Wamalwa, MP Kimilili, Didmas Barasa. Good morning, gentlemen. Karibuni sana. Of course, the biggest headline today has to do with that lengthy, very long judgment read yesterday by the Supreme Court judges. Of course, an extension of the judgment they made about 22 days ago with regard to the presidential elections held on August 8th, annulling the results and the entire process and calling for fresh repeat election. That is what makes the headlines this morning. On the Daily Nation, the spread and the splash reads IEBC off the hook. Now the Standard reads how the IEBC failed Kenya. Now the confusion here is what we'll be looking at. How the IEBC failed Kenya, IEBC off the hook. What exactly do these different headlines mean? Before we get there, let's take a look at some other headlines that could escape our attention this morning. One is highlighted on the front page of the Daily Nation. There's a small column on the left hand side. Health crisis drives patients to Tanzania. A 43-year-old woman who sought treatment in Tanzania for pregnancy-related complications as a result of the nurses' strike died yesterday. Miss Josephine Chole from Taita Taveta County died as she waited to be admitted to Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center. That's on page 12 of the Daily Nation. It's very unfortunate, the health crisis. The nurses' strike is actually on its 106th day today, and it continues. Of course, the laboratory technicians have joined that strike. Clinicians have joined the strike as well. And this story just goes to show how the issue is getting out of hand. Also, something else which is major but could escape our attention this morning as well. On the back page of the Daily Nation, test papers, answer booklets combined for examiners and the candidates. Please note, and this has to do mainly with the KCPE, national examination candidates will have question papers and answer booklets combined in one document. This is according to the Kenya National Examinations Council. The council said the papers would be combined where applicable and that candidates would not be issued with separate answer booklets. So for candidates, you better be prepared. You could have both the question paper and the answer booklet in one document. That's something that could escape our attention this morning, because mainly all the headlines, and if you look at both papers, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11 pages of the Daily Nation are just about whatever happened yesterday at the Supreme Court. When it comes to the Standard, page 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All that to do with that ruling by the Supreme Court. That means we don't have more headlines to look at today. Most of our discussions today will be based on that ruling. Let's kick off, gentlemen. General feelings about the judgment, because it appears even after the summary that was given, I think on September 1st by the court, there were a lot of expectations on this written judgment that people still expected a lot would come out of it. Is that what you got, Senator? Let's start with you. Did you get more from this lengthy judgment read yesterday?
Let me say first, to begin with, Fred, that it's a relief finally, because most Kenyans were waiting for yesterday. They were waiting for this judgment, as it were. Let me begin by saying that it is now acknowledged across the landscape that that the system, the arrangement we have right now, whereby it is possible for the Supreme Court to render a decision before justifying it is not a proper way forward in terms of execution and delivery of justice. And so, if you assess what it has been, or how the political fever rose since the day when the decision was rendered until yesterday when it was justified, you saw political temperatures rising very high. And so let me begin by saying then that it was a relief. People exhaled finally after listening to the judgment. But there are several questions that abound still. Probably more than answers, and the first would be, in my own point of view, is after listening to the entire judgment and the fact that in that judgment it was clearly said by majority of the judges that there were irregularities and illegalities, and that was the basis of them nullifying, and it was also clear from that decision that it was IEBC that was in quote supposed to be indicted for those specific irregularities and illegalities. Then listening to yesterday, and actually if you look at both headlines, as you've said, a thread between the Nation and the Standard, one saying IEBC is off the hook, the other one saying how IEBC failed Kenyans, then that tells you that Kenyans right now are a lot much more in more confusion than clarity. Because, for example, I was expecting, and that was what most of us were waiting to hear, what are these specifics in, especially the illegalities? Where and who in the IEBC is said to have gone wrong? So in the first place, let me assert, as it has come out, that has left a lot still unanswered. Secondly, we are clear that it is IEBC that we are expecting as per the constitutional requirement to conduct the elections within 60 days, and that is the court order that exists. And so again, if you, for example, Fred, and I'm sure most Kenyans did, if you listened, for example, to what the NASA brigade said immediately after the ruling, it was unbelievable. I was asking myself, Fred, does NASA listen to a different court than the rest of the Kenyans? Because when they came out, you had the thing we were saying that IEBC have been indicted, that there will be no elections within the next 60 days.
And Senator, we'll be looking at now the way forward in a short while.
Yeah, sure.
But I just wanted to sample the general views. Yes. Now you say what you got from that is actually more confusion. From the summary they issued and what they gave yesterday.
In as far as the IEBC is concerned, there is more confusion. And then, on the specific reasons and justification as to why were the elections nullified, why was the victory of the president taken away, that was very critical too. And you could hear from the justification, and granted that the majority had their way and the minority had their say, but to my view, the minority who had their say carried more weight in justification. And let me single out, for example, like the judgment as read out by Jackton Ojwang. You could follow it, you could follow the reasoning until his conclusion. And if you listened to probably the weight rendered by the majority, and as we say that, Fred, I was also very curious that I don't know for what reasons that, for example, Justice Smokin Wanjala was away. Maybe it has to be very good reasons, because my opinion was that on such a critical day, on such a moment when every Kenyan was there, it would have been also good to hear what was his point of view, for him to have appended his signature to the majority, judgment, just like all the others did. But in as far as the weight of what really the justification was, I don't think, to my mind, I was convinced that the majority convinced most of us that they were justified in taking away the sovereign rights of the people of Kenya by nullifying the act.
On which side of the political divide you come from. But general feelings.
I agree with you.
Let's go to Bwana Chris Wamalwa for now. Bwana Chris Wamalwa, your general feeling from yesterday, did you get, were your expectations met? What you expected to come out of this detailed judgment, is that what you received? Are you more confused, like the senator says?
I don't think I'm more confused than my friend Senator Wamatangi. The justifications were given, and going as per the ruling, particularly when you look at Article 86 of the Constitution, which talks about that IBC must ensure that the voting is simple, is accurate, is transparent. And when you look at the rulings of all the judges, actually they were basing on that Article 86 of the Constitution. And the truth of the matter is, IBC failed. Can you imagine? You are being told the 34As, they declared the results without all the Form 34As. That was an illegality. Look at the issue of, when you talk about accuracy. If you have Form 34As, which do not have the serial numbers, which do not have the security features, that is an illegality. Yes. Because it negates Article 86 of the Constitution. The only worry I have is IBC maybe to have made a conclusion that they don't have the specifics as far as the culpable people are concerned in IBC. Yes. And that does not mean they're innocent. The DPP can come and do, maybe they can do
but you agree that was one major expectation, that probably the
absolutely, but remember, before any judgment is done, yes, it's supposed to be based on the evidence. Maybe that the evidence that was given at that particular time was not enough for them to make that judgment. But obviously, if you are told there is a problem when it comes to the voting system, the KMS system and whatever it is, somebody must be accountable when it comes to the IBC. So to me, IBC is not yet off the hook. When you look at the Election Offences Act, which we passed in Parliament, the people are supposed to be held responsible, personal responsibility for the things that were done. So it is very unfortunate for Senator Wamatangi to come here and say he's more confused. To me, I'm not confused, but I do understand. You can only make a judgment based on the evidence given. Yes. And all these issues didn't go right, yes, because as per Article 88 of the Constitution, it is IBC that is responsible to carry out the elections. So the buck stops at the IBC. So it's the responsibility of IBC, yes, maybe to establish its own internal mechanism to be able to investigate and be able to know who are these people who are culpable. Do
you, for example, understand the confusion between the headlines on the Daily Nation and the Standard, or do you agree with both? The Daily Nation
to me, I disagree with what Nation has said, and this was actually very responsible for Nation newspaper to come up with a headline and say IBC off the hook. That is very, very wrong. It is totally misleading. So if at all IBC never did any criminal offense or whatever it is, then the elections will have been credible. And I want to justify something which Honorable Senator Wamatangi has said. You can't come and say the victory was stolen. If the process was fraudulent, if at all maybe there's a multiplier effect in the system, instead of getting, let's say, 10 votes, and there's a multiplier in the system, you get 1,000 votes. You cannot come and say the output is correct and yet the entire process is fraudulent. If the process is fraudulent, obviously, the end result is also fraudulent. So you can't come and tell us that the victory was stolen. The best thing for us to do is for IBC to ensure we have some accurate measures in place as contemplated in Article 86, so that Kenyans go back to the elections, so that we get to know who is the right winner.
We'll be getting to those specifics in a short while. Let's get Bwana Didmas Barasa's feeling, the MP for Kimilili constituency. Bwana Barasa, are you confused? Are you satisfied with this detailed judgment? Are there expectations that you had that were not met?
Well, with the fact that they had already nullified the presidential elections, I was not surprised, because from the time that a Kenyan voter goes to vote to the time that those numbers were announced at the polling center, nobody contested those numbers. So the sovereign will of the Kenyan people as to who is the president of this country was never challenged at that particular point. And what happened is that the majority view felt that the process from the polling center to the transmission of results to the National Tallying Center, that is where we had massive irregularities. And I agree with the Judge Maraga. When you want to investigate a person who are falsifying those forms 34 and 35 Bs, 33 and 34 Bs, you must carry out a forensic investigations where you dust the fingerprints of the people, and by now those forms have changed so many hands. So it's very difficult for you to ascertain who is culpable. And I will agree with the headline of the Nation that IEBC is off the hook, because the Supreme Court, Judge Maraga himself made it very clear that at this point in time it's very difficult to pinpoint who was responsible. And the court has given its verdict. We have to abide by it and move forward. And this points out that some of the laws we make as a country, especially when we are nearing the elections date, are the ones that are bringing in confusion. Because to me, what is important is to ensure that the sovereign will of the Kenyan people is expressed from the time that this person leaves his house to the polling stations, and to that point when the results are announced at the polling center. To me, what happens thereafter is no important.
So by agreeing with the headline on the Daily Nation, do you necessarily disagree with the one on the Standard, which seems to indicate that IEBC failed? How the IEBC failed Kenya?
I completely disagree with what is on the Standard, because what happens now is that some forms were not signed. Surely we have party agents who are appointed by the party. If they decide after the counting of elections to go home, do you want to blame the person who casted their vote in favor of a particular candidate? So we blame the system, and we blame our dubious laws which were passed when we were nearing the elections date. That's why we are saying now that is this not the time for IEBC to begin receiving proposals from political parties and other people, because we have existing laws, and we need to amend and realign these laws so that we have clear flow of results. We have a clear flow of how we are going to get the supreme will of the Kenyan people when it comes to voting.
Okay, gentlemen, I know you want to respond to that. But Chris Omalwa, you need to clarify something?
Yes, I need to clarify.
Briefly.
You know, with due respect, Honorable Didma is my very good friend, and he's been referring to Form 33 and 35. We need to know what are these forms is referring to.
Is 33 or 34?
Because the issue here, the big deal here, we're talking about the 34As and 34Bs. Secondly, because you don't have any 35 or whatever it is, maybe it was a slip of his tongue, you need to clarify. Secondly, we need to know that when you look at that judgment, where the big problem is, first, we had some polling centers which are not gazetted, and yet they were receiving.
That is an irregularity. That's an irregularity. Gentlemen, let's have a very guided discussion here, because if we delve into the details, we will get to that. We will get to that.
Yeah, but before that, Fred, the clarification that he should have made on what was being said by Mheshimiwa here is very simple. And if you listened to the judgment as read by Justice Philomena, she was very clear on precisely the point that he is making. In fact, I wish you would replay.
Which one specifically?
She said specifically that between the time the Kenyan person went to the voting station and cast their ballot and put it inside the ballot box, and that vote was removed and counted, there was no mistake, there was no anomaly, there was no problem.
I don't think
transmission.
Exactly I listened carefully.
And then lastly, on this issue of IEBC officials indicted or not, you just need to listen to what exactly. And you see, Justice Maraga was very clear. He started with dealing with the illegalities first, all of them, and there was none of the illegalities from the allegations of the Makueni story that there were threats to chiefs, to the issue of cabinet secretaries campaigning, and 3 on the specifics of individuals in the IEBC. All those issues I think which were being termed as illegalities, Senator, he was very clear.
Senator,
and until, excuse me, have your time. Until when he came to dealing with the irregularities, that is when now he said, on this one they are convinced, on this one, but on the illegalities, Fred, exactly as reported in the Daily Nation headline, there was none of the illegalities that was confirmed by the Supreme Court as read by Justice Maraga, and indeed there was no indictment of IEBC officials.
Justice Maraga was very clear on illegalities. Maybe he never listened. And this is based on Article 86 of the Constitution, which says that the voting must be simple, the voting must be accurate, and he specified that from their own judgment, the process was not simple. He said it. I don't know whether you are listening or maybe you are listening selectively. So in terms of illegalities, this Article 86 of the Constitution was violated. When it comes to the issues of accuracy...
What was the specific illegality? What was the specific illegality?
An illegality is something you've contravened.
What was the specific illegality?
Okay, you should listen.
Gentlemen.
We are talking about the issue of accuracy. He asked, was this done, was it accurate? It was not accurate. That means it negates Article 86 of the Constitution.
Chris, you can
listen, just a minute. Just a minute. An illegality, okay, let me define an illegality. An illegality is something that you've violated the law.
So what was
violated? I'm telling you Article 86. If you don't know what it says, I can read it for you. Article 86 says, when it comes to voting, the voting must be simple, must be accurate. So in terms of the issue of the Constitution, absolutely, and that's where the illegality is coming in. But when it comes to the Elections Act,
the specific illegality, continue talking over each other, we will not get to listen.
But
Fred, let's elaborate Dismas Barasa to
let me just make a simple analysis here.
Yes.
The point of departure is the metrics to define the simplicity and the accuracy. But if you look at from the processes of identification of the voter to the time that the voter casts his or her ballot and the results announced at the polling center, I think the process is very simple, it's very verifiable.
It goes up
the complexity begins from what we are saying, the transmission. But we have a ruling already at the Court of Appeal that affirms that whatever is announced at the polling center is final. So maybe we need to relook at the same process from the time that the results are transmitted into the National Tallying Center. That is where the issues came from. And I would want to disagree with my good friend Honorable Chris that from the findings of the Supreme Court, there is nowhere that any judge has doubted the figures that were announced at the polling center. What is coming out clearly is that some forms didn't have some features, some forms didn't have some stamps, others they were not signed, irregularities that happened from the time that the results were announced from the polling center to the National Tallying Center. So we need to focus.
Yes, Barasa, do you agree? Because the two gentlemen disagree or rather differ on whether or not there were illegalities as judged by the Supreme Court. They say there were irregularities. When Chris Omalo insists, yes, there were illegalities as well. Senator Matangi disputes that even in the judgment there were no illegalities pointed out. Do you agree with the Senator?
I want to agree with you that there is no illegalities committed. But what is been pointed out, there were irregularities. Some agents failing to sign the forms, some forms differing, they have no security marks, others have no serial numbers. Those is the basis that those of the majority view, based on to invalidate the presidential elections. Because if you claim that there were illegalities, then you must also point out who committed these illegalities and prosecute those people.
And Fred, quickly, let's be clear about this one. That indeed we are not groping to look for whether there were illegalities or not. There were illegalities that were claimed to have been committed. And that is what Justice Maraga disposed of specifically one by one. Remember, there was the issue that there were chiefs who were threatened in Makueni. That would have been an illegality.
That is not part of the process.
My friend,
we want to talk about the issue
now. Remember, there was a claim that cabinet secretaries against the law went to campaign for government.
That is immaterial.
That was another issue. Two, there was a specific claim that public funds were used to campaign for government, and Justice Maraga was also very clear and said that matter is still pending in another court. Now, three, that specific IEBC officials went and infiltrated that particular the system, and that they committed illegalities. All that Justice Maraga was very clear on. He said that they are not able to pinpoint and pick specific individuals, and that is the point. That's the point. So on the question of illegalities, we must be very, very clear. But unfortunately, let me summarize my thought on this one. If you look and listen to what NASA officials said immediately when the judgment was read, it is clear in their mind, and that is the carry-on that Chris Wamaro is having right now, that they have already written a script that they want to ride on a claim on illegalities so that they can forward and bring forward their next agenda, which is to claim that there will be no government in the next 60 days, which is a fallacy.
In a short while, we'll be getting to that, the way forward after this judgment, and what NASA says and what Jubilee says will happen next. Plus, on this issue of irregularities vis-a-vis illegalities, we have a legal mind in the House, and he'll be joining the panel in a short while, Dan Maanzo MP Makueni, to actually explain to us the illegalities or irregularities, because that appears to be much of what we're differing about. But let's take a break. When we return, we'll continue looking at these headlines, quite a number of them, including the fact that CJ Maraga said that if at all these things are repeated and the Supreme Court is called upon to adjudge or to adjudicate on such a matter, they would still issue a ruling as they did. That after the break.